Okay, let's get started on our card. So for my father's birthday card, I wanted to turn to a set of masculine paper, and the paper that is in this year's January through June mini catalog, also known as the spring catalog, is perfect for that. It's a whole bunch of different papers that look like men's suiting, and I did a full walkthrough of this set. You'll find it up a little in the corner up above, where I'll have a link to that video. So I thought that this paper here would make a good candidate for the front of the card. And I really also liked this gray design here, and thought that that would make just a nice complement to the blue diamonds. So to start with, I took a piece of basic gray paper, and for the front that I wanted to have on the card, a standard size card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, just wasn't large enough to fit everything and then still have room to show that pretty paper. So I am creating a 5 by 7 card. Now from one sheet of paper, you can actually get 4 5 by 7 cards, and I will have a link to a downloadable that you can find in my on my website in the Crafty Friends Club vault that shows exactly how to cut the paper to get 4 5 by 7 card fronts out of one single sheet. So I have my card here. I had a piece of basic gray cut to 7 by 10, folded at 5 to create a 5 by 7 card. Now the next thing that I have is I wanted to put a sentiment on the front that said happy birthday, and there were a bunch of different choices, and what I ended up with were the well-written dies, and there's a happy in there and there's a birthday in there, and I thought that that was perfect. Now I wanted to include his age because he is all of 82 years old, and so I am using the playful alphabet dies to get the 8 and the 2. Now with the 8 and the 2, I wanted to have an ND for 82nd birthday. So I turned to my little friend, the friend die, and that has an N and a D. That goes very nicely with the 8 and the 2. So I'm going to use some Night of Navy paper, and I'm going to cut out happy birthday. I only need to have the N and the D on the edge of the paper, as well as the 8 and the 2, and I will be right back with those. Okay, so what that creates is this happy 82nd birthday, and you can see that I just snipped off the edge here for the N and the D, and so we're going to tuck that behind there like that. Now the other thing that you want to pay attention to is make sure that you don't miss the little dot on the I. If that comes out with some of the other little interior pieces, save that little dot because that does go for the I in birthday. The next part that I had to decide on was, what am I going to put this on? So it just wouldn't look good simply plunked onto the gray paper, and I did want to have some blue in there. So what I decided to use was this frame, this cutout from the Dandy Garden laser cut papers, and I showed you this collection. I'll put a link up in the corner up above for the walkthrough of the Dandy Garden suite of the products in there. And this was the laser cut paper that is in there. And there are 4 other frames that are in there as well that are basically designed to fit a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card. But I thought that this was perfect to show off enough of the paper around it and still have some visual presence. That's why I chose this 5 by 7 size for this card. Now, you notice I only have just this one piece, and I'm going to be using both the blue and the gray. So what I'm actually going to do is cut an 1.5 inch strip out of, well, effectively what will be the middle of the card. So let's get out the paper trimmer and do that. So I just need to have an 1.5 inch strip in the middle. It doesn't really need to be in the middle because you'll never notice that it doesn't align. And I like to use this edge here when I cut anything under 1.5 inches, because that way the paper is pushed nicely up to the top edge and it has full support by the lip here on both sides. So let's trim this down to 1.5 inches. So I'm actually going to cut this to 1 3/4 inches, even amount on the top and the bottom of our strip. So this is going to be this direction. And we're going to align it like that. Now that just doesn't look very good, does it? So what are we going to do? I am going to bring in some Whisper white cardstock. Now this paper, I actually had trimmed down to, I took 1/8 inch, nope, 1/4 inch off of each edge. So this was cut to, after I took the 5x7 piece out, I cut this to 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. And that way, when we have our next piece, which is the Whisper white cardstock, that will leave 1/8 inch reveal all around, and then we're gonna have the white in between the gray, and that will just set that off really nicely. Plus, it'll hide these cut marks. So here we go. I have a piece of Whisper white cardstock. This is cut to 6 3/4 by 6 1/2, and that will give me this 1/16 inch border all around. So that's 1/8 inch on each side. So since this is 6 1/2, and I only need 4 7/8, I'm going to cut this to 4 7/8, and that will give me a 1 5/8 inch strip left over, and that will give me a 1/16 inch reveal around the edges of my blue paper. And see, we just have a slight reveal all around. I'm going to move Happy Birthday aside for a moment. Now the next thing I'm going to do, this is for the outside of the card, and you can see 1/16 inch all around here, but we're also going to need some paper on the inside of the card. Well, guess what? We're not going to see 99% of the center of this white paper. So I took the largest die from the stitched rectangle dies, and I'm going to use this as the center. Cut this out of the center for the inside of my card, then I'm going to stamp my sentiment on the inside. So let me go take this away, and I will be right back with our centerpiece. And there we go. Now, if you don't have the stitched rectangle dies, not to worry, you can certainly use your paper trimmer and trim out pretty much anything within a 1/4 inch all around using your paper trimmer. But I do like this nice stitched border on here. Let's adhere this down to the outside of the card. The other nice thing is you don't have to be overly exact on how perfectly aligned this is in the center. As long as it's more than 1/8 inch away from the edge, you're golden. So this gives me a 1/16 inch reveal, which I like to measure out to visually see that before I try to adhere this down. Now we can adhere our gray strips as well. Now we're going to use the white here and adhere the gray side on down to the white. And with this piece, you will never notice that we had cut the center of that white cardstock out. Okay, let's work on our sentiment next. I am actually using 2 different sentiments on the inside of the card. And I really liked this, to one of the world's greatest dads, but I wanted to have a happy birthday that went with that. And I could have used this combined with that, but that just seemed like it was too many different fonts, too many different sizes. And this is kind of a font that doesn't have little edges on it, a sans serif font, and so is this one. So I thought the styles of these 2 were close enough in terms of styles and size on top of it to be able to go together. However, this is a photopolymer stamp. This is a rubber stamp. So you'll see what I did. For stamping sentiments, I do like to use a stamp positioning tool. I happen to have a Misty because that's what I have, and it was actually a gift from the father who's receiving this birthday card. So I aligned first the rubber stamp and positioned it on my card where I wanted, and then I aligned the happy birthday right above it, and we'll stamp that second because we have to add the little pad in between. So I'm going to take my stitched cutout, position that here in the corner. I always like using a stamp positioning tool when I do sentiments, just to make sure that I get really good ink coverage. And indeed, it looks like this ink pad may not be the juiciest. So we may need to stamp this twice, which is exactly why you want to use a stamp positioning tool. Okay, now that we have our sentiment stamped for the rubber stamp, I'm going to take that off, set that aside, and then you can do this with the Stampin' Up stamp positioning tool as well. There you would just flip the lid. Here I'm just flipping the paper and set that in, and now we can stamp our second sentiment right above that. And for that, we're using the photopolymer stamp. It says happy birthday. There we go. Happy birthday to one of the world's greatest dads. I'm going to set that aside for a moment. So the next step that we're going to do is we're going to work on positioning our sentiment on the outside of the card. So this piece is going to go on the front in the middle, and that shows lots of the beautiful papers, as well as having more than enough room for this fairly large happy birthday sentiment. I'm just going to take some of my Tombow glue here and just dab little dabs of it on the back of the letters, especially on the letters that kind of stick up and stick down. To make sure that I leave enough room for the 82nd before I glue the 8 down, I am going to line up where I want my 2 and then my ND. And that way I know there'll be enough room for both of those. The ND will stick behind the 2, so I'm going to set that one down first. I hope that if you're enjoying this video and this idea for a masculine birthday card, that you would consider making your purchases for the products through my online store. I will put a link to that down in the show notes below. I do appreciate all of my viewers' purchases. It does help defray the costs of buying materials to make these projects for you. And you are helping out a small business, which is especially vital at this time of year. So you are greatly appreciated. And don't forget the little dot from the eye. There we go. Now for the final step, I am going to raise this up on some Stampin' Dimensionals just to give a tiny bit of dimension to this card. And these edge strips are perfect for that. I'm just going to center this in the middle so that there's even spacing top to bottom, left to right. And press that down, and there we go. We have a beautiful masculine happy birthday card, personalized with the recipient's age. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you can give it a thumbs up. I sure would appreciate it. And I hope you have a fabulous day. Please hit the subscribe button so that you can be notified of future videos. And again, I was certainly would appreciate if you were interested in recreating this at home, if you would consider making your purchase through my online store. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.